gotta be kidding me.
A video game franchise that has haunted generations, Resident Evil. Since 1996, Resident Evil has been the definitive survival horror franchise, shaping not just the gaming industry, but also popular culture. From terrifying encounters with zombies to intense action-packed moments, the series has evolved drastically over the decades. Today, we're exploring how Resident Evil transformed from its humble beginnings into the iconic franchise it is now. The original Resident Evil was a game-changer for the horror genre. Now, it may not appeal to modern gamers who are used to high-end graphics, but back in the day, this was scary as hell. It introduced a new kind of horror experience, survival horror. Players were thrown into a labyrinthine mansion, facing limited resources and claustrophobic environments as they fought off the undead. After a few sequels, the series hit a turning point in 2005 with Resident Evil 4. This was game more action-focused with an over-the-shoulder camera. It almost hit the perfect balance between horror and action. Resident Evil 4 revolutionized not just the franchise, but the entire third-person shooter genre. It pushed the series into the mainstream and is still regarded as one of the greatest games ever made. Seeing the success of Resident Evil 4, Capcom shifted heavily on action. But this is where things started to go south. Many longtime fans felt the series had drifted too far from its survival horror roots. Resident Evil 6 especially was criticized for its convoluted plot and over-the-top gameplay. This led to a decline in the franchise's critical reputation. But in 2017, Capcom brought the series back to its horror roots with Resident Evil 7.
Welcome to the family, son.
Here you play as Ethan Winters, who goes to Louisiana looking for his fiancée, Mia, who has been missing for 3 years. Set in a decrepit Baker mansion and focused on psychological terror, it was the first main Resident Evil game to use first-person view. With its amazing environments and storyline, and not to mention the horrifying villains, Resident Evil 7 brought the lost fanbase back. It won't be wrong to say that RE7 saved the franchise. After Resident Evil 7, Capcom released a remake of Resident Evil 2. The game offers a choice of two protagonists, Leon Kennedy or Claire Redfield, as they attempt to survive a zombie outbreak in the city caused by a virus leak in an underground lab owned by Umbrella, a company behind almost all the trouble in Resident Evil games. Villains like Mr. X became nightmare for many players. I mean, you can't even kill this guy. After Resident Evil 2, a Resident Evil 3 remake was also made, which was well received by the fans. After the success of 2 remakes, Resident Evil Village was released, continuing the story of Ethan Winters from Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 8 continues blending horror and action in a balance that appeals to both old and new fans. With cutting-edge graphics, gripping storytelling, and iconic characters, the franchise proves it still has the power to terrify and captivate audiences. After Resident Evil Village, Capcom decided to take a bold step. In June of 2022, it announced a remake of Resident Evil 4. This was bold because this remake had to do the impossible. Please fans of one of the most celebrated games of all time. For the most part, it does just that. Resident Evil 4 is a victory lap for what has been called the new golden age of Capcom. Now let's see why exactly Resident Evil games are so popular. There are 3 main reasons. First reason is the immersive story of Resident Evil games. There is romance, bromance, betrayals. The more you play, the more you connect with the characters. You see how extreme situations can bring best and worst in people. Second reason is horror. Not just sudden jump scares, but also creepy kind of horror. Like knowing something scary will happen if you go down that corridor, but you have no choice. And third reason is the gameplay. Running through corridors, shooting enemies, defeating bosses, it all feels satisfying. From its origins as a survival horror pioneer to its modern reinvention, the Resident Evil franchise has not only adapted to the times, but has shaped the gaming industry. As it continues to evolve, one thing remains certain. Resident Evil will keep us on the edge of our seats, whether we're running from zombies, bioweapons, or our own fears.